Welcome to Turtlebird Reviews. Today we are reviewing Raya and the Last Dragon.
Raya and the Last Dragon was released on March 5th earlier this year. It tells the story of a girl named Raya, played by Kelly Marie Tran, who is determined to find the last legendary dragon of her world, played by Awkwafina, in the ancient realm of Kumandra.
So what initially attracted us to this film were the visuals. The trailer perfectly showcases just how far 3D animation has come in the past few years. And this holds true in the movie itself. Like, the movie looks fantastic. It's absolutely breathtaking at times. The water flowing through dimly lit caves is nearly photorealistic. The lighting of the sunrise or a lantern-lit village is beautiful. The landscapes are gorgeous. It's almost to the point where these cartoon characters look like they're interacting with the real world. It's very impressive, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a little strange because at this point in time, Disney films almost look that way, where everything looks like the real world, and then you have these characters that look nothing like real humans, and you wonder,
big old eyes.
You wonder if they should just make more live action films with how they approach their art style. Another highlight we should mention is the choreography. It's pretty decent. Now, somebody like Shadiversity, and you can check his channel out in the description, will probably be able to analyze every single detail of the swordplay and tell you exactly how realistic it is and where the flaws are. But from a layman's perspective, I mean, it looked really good to us. Stunt professionals used mocap and other methods to record their motions as they performed real moves. So they actually did a lot of the fights in real life with real people, and they just, they hashed it out in that way, and then they copied those motions over into the animation. And it adds a little bit of extra weight to those scenes.
So all the fighting styles are based off of real Southeast Asian martial art styles.
Yep. So a little bit reminiscent of how they did the same thing in Avatar, the animated series.
The voice acting is predictably excellent. Kelly Marie Tran does a great job as Raya, our protagonist. Awkwafina brings us a suitably ditzy performance as the dragon, Sisu.
A standout actor for me was Isaac Wang as Bone. I think that's how he say his name in the film. I don't remember. But he adds a lot of life to the character with the energy he brings to his performance. Gemma Chan effectively plays the antagonist of the film, Namari. There's really not a whole lot to criticize about the acting. It's pretty good. Some of the lines are cheesier than others, but that's kind of the writer's fault.
Yeah. The score was written by James Newton Howard. It wasn't super memorable for us. It conveys the emotion, I guess, that they're going for. It's not like on the level of something like How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, not nearly as good as that.
No. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It mixes traditional orchestra fantasy style with electronic undertones, thumping percussion. There are also some more traditional instruments from
cultures that
they're trying to base this fantasy world off of. So that's a nice addition. But it also sounds really modern in some cases.
Yeah, a lot of the electronic stuff especially makes it feel very modern.
And that takes away from this fantasy setting that we're trying to be set in.
Yeah. It would be a little different if they did something, if the world felt a little bit more like that. So if you were doing a movie based on Horizon Zero Dawn, I wouldn't really have as much of an issue with it, because the electronic stuff and the bass, that's clearly like synths and things, that would fit a lot better because there's electronic stuff in the world. It's kind of cyberpunky a little bit. But there's nothing like that.
This is out of place.
Yeah, it's a little out of place with how traditional the setting is. So as far as the plot goes, it feels a bit derivative of other fantasy stories. But it has a few original ideas here and there that add to it. A mindless force of evil called the Droon threatens the thriving lands of Kumandra. Long ago, the ancient dragons defeated the Droon and revived all the people, but were left as stone themselves. Their power was stored in a magical gem, which the people fought over. 5 tribes eventually formed: Fang, Heart, Spine, Talon, and Tail, named according to their placement along a dragon-shaped river. Hundreds of years later, we follow Raya, the daughter of the chief of the Heart tribe, as her people attempt to make peace with other tribes, and it does not go well. In the ensuing chaos, the gem shatters into several pieces, one of each being taken by a different tribe. The Droon reawakens and engulfs most of the people. Years after this, we see Raya as she wanders alone, much older now, looking for the legendary dragon she believes can banish the Droon once and for all.
This film is full of fantasy tropes. There's a group of ancient dragons, there's a faceless evil force turning people to stone, there's weird animals and locations, a dragon-shaped continent, and a magic gem that splits into just enough pieces for each tribe to take one. It's a bit much, but it sets up a world that feels like it has potential, despite the cliche structure. It's reminiscent of the world of Avatar and its warring nations, energetic magic system, and martial arts warriors. Unfortunately, it fails to use these elements to deliver a satisfying story. After a lengthy prologue sequence setting up the conflict, there's precious little time to really explore the world and make it feel real before we watch our characters try to save it. We really only get to see how the Druun affects a few people before they quickly band together and they do whatever Raya tells them is necessary to get to the third act and wrap up the movie. It's kind of sad, really. We just blitz through that second act. I don't know. I don't feel like anything too important. Yeah.
It's kind of sad. There's a lot more potential, but so little of the world is developed. They show you a ton of different parts of it in just very brief, split-second drive-bys. They spend a little time in a couple of the different tribes, and they show you, some of the destruction the Druun has caused. But you only get to see how it affects a single person from a few of the tribes. Even with that, they don't really have time to dwell on that. Like, their arcs are pretty brief.
Yeah.
The rest of the film is just getting to that finale so we can wrap everything up and we can have magic save the day. It feels like they wanted the epic scale of something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you have so many different nations and cultures, and there's so much diversity in a world like Avatar, and they don't pull off any of that in Raya. And to be fair, Avatar's a huge TV show, and Raya's only 2 hours, right? So they can only do so much, but I feel like they really bit off more than they could chew with that.
So now that we've gotten those points out of the way, it's time to talk about our biggest problem with the film, which is the writing.
So first off, far too much of the story is told through exposition. The opening sequence is a lot of narration instead of just letting us see what happens as it unfolds. As a result, we miss out on a lot of the immersion that we could have in this world, and it kind of makes it feel a little hollow. We're rushed from one place to another without the chance to truly taste the unique places that we're traveling through. The diversity of each region is supposed to be an important part of the world of Kumandra, and integral to this story about differences and unity, but we hardly ever get to experience that for ourselves.
The overarching evil force in the story, the Druun, is just that. It's an evil force. It's faceless. It's nameless. It shows up one day and it wrecks things.
Yeah.
And there's no explanation for it. Where did it come from? Where did it go? We don't know.
We don't know.
There wasn't very much thought put into that. The dialogue, for the most part, is fine, though it's usually pretty predictable. In some instances, it does take you out of the world by using extremely modern lingo and phrases, especially between young Raya and Namari in the beginning.
Yeah, in the prologue section where they're setting up the world and they show you the inciting incident. Like, they're talking to each other like you'd imagine a couple of teenage girls talking to each other on the street right now.
Very, very 2020s American.
Yeah.
But this story takes place in, like, a timeless fantasy setting world based off of several countries and cultures of Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And we get this. And that really distracts from the world and atmosphere that they're trying to create, especially because this story seems to take itself more seriously than some other films like Tangled or Frozen.
Yep.
It has a far more serious atmosphere, and them making creative choices like that just seems to be in bad taste.
The humor is mostly okay, but it's pretty shallow and, it's directed at kids.
Yeah.
The story progression is good up to a point in how that's presented to us, but it drops off rapidly near the middle of the film and only goes downhill from there. It relies on a lot of magic and contrivance and luck to get it to the ending, which makes the climax and subsequent resolution feel very unearned. This brings us to the characters. Now, some characters are written adequately enough, but what's been done with Raya is unforgivable. The message of the film is that unity is difficult, and sometimes you need to be the first one to step out and trust others before peace can be accomplished. And this seems okay at first glance, but the writers take it too far, and it's bad. So after her family is taken away from her, and the other tribes betray her people, Raya is understandably jaded as a character. She doesn't trust anyone, least of all her childhood friend Namari. She wants to do whatever it takes to save the world, no matter who stands in her way. But along her journey, she comes across many people who challenge her beliefs, telling her that it's the right thing to do to give others a chance before assuming the worst. This sounds nice, but makes little sense in this harsh world that we see on screen. Without spoiling anything, we ultimately see Raya give in and trust her worst enemies, despite all her experiences, and having no real reason to do so. She basically has no choice. And thanks to Disney magic, everything turns out okay.
Thank you, Disney. The story that they should have been trying to tell, and maybe they were trying to tell, is that forgiveness is the first step towards unifying a people that are full of enmity. It could have been a powerful story about Raya extending peace despite being wronged and knowing that she might be hurt further. But trust is not the word that you're looking for here.
It's forgiveness.
It's forgiveness, and the film is undermining our main character when, in any logical world, she's right not to trust her nemesis. The growth that's shown in Raya is her abandoning her reasonable conclusions because she literally has no other choice.
So not only is it a really awful message to begin with, but she doesn't really make a choice in the end. It's more forced upon her, which is really bad either way.
If only they had Raya taking a more active role of extending forgiveness and being the bigger person for the sake of healing her nation. I mean, the movie even touches on how Fang, which is Namari's faction, they're afraid to turn back from what they started because they know the other factions will retaliate against them for what they've done. If Raya had led the way in forgiveness, that would be the perfect lesson in how restoring broken relationships often requires self-sacrifice.
What we're left with is a horrible message for kids and a really puzzling way to solve the conflict of the story. Not only does it make no sense for our characters, but it actively encourages unhealthy behavior in the real world. This film tells us that trusting people who have a consistent track record of hurting us is morally correct and will lead to positive outcomes. What if someone took advantage of you? What if they physically hurt you? Raya tells us that trusting blindly is the answer there. And it's outrageous that a high-profile Disney film like this one has such poorly thought-out messages.
So it feels like the rest of the characters are mostly there for entertainment or to give us a small glimpse at the different ways that the Droon has affected Kamandra. There's not much development to be seen aside from Raya and her nemesis, Namari. And the problem with Namari is, to avoid spoilers, that her choices make very little sense. She spends most of the film chasing after Raya and taking inspiration from her mother, who desires the prosperity of Fang, their faction, above everything else. Which, it's a fine enough motivation that works well enough.
Yep.
But once the plot finds her catching up with Raya, we're nearly done with the film, and what the audience believes will be an epic showdown is instead an illogical mess. As previously mentioned, the film uses Disney magic and the power of trust to wrap everything up. But questions are left unanswered and motivations are just completely forgotten.
Yep.
It's frustrating how quickly it falls apart really fast in the third act. Besides Raya and Namari, everyone else is either running from the Droon or telling Raya to trust people, including the dragon, Sisu. Sisu's not a terrible character, except when they use her to push the trust issue on Raya. Sisu is gullible and naive, a trait that literally almost gets her murdered, okay? And yet we're supposed to come to the conclusion that she's right all along.
Yep.
What?
It makes no sense.
No. There's a huge disconnect between what the characters are saying and what's happening to them on screen. I almost wonder if they're trying to go with the idea that people inside are basically good, and if you wait long enough and trust them long enough, then eventually the good will come out. But that's not even what happens with their own people in this world.
Yeah.
So that makes no sense.
So before we move on, there's one other character I have to talk about, and that's the baby. And I'm sure you've seen this baby in the trailers. She's introduced as a sort of ninja con artist in league with a band of monkeys who help her commit acts of mischief and fraud. And it's innocent enough in theory, like it's fine as a concept. It gets a lot of laughs from the audience, of course, and it adds a fun, dynamic element to some of the action scenes in the film. But the problem is we never learn why this toddler is so powerful. Her abilities push the plot forward in huge ways, but her abilities are never accounted for. And it comes across as really strange because you'd think in a world as magical and crazy as Kumandra, the writers could handle this very easily. Perhaps she's a mischievous spirit who is only in disguise as a baby, and she enjoys toying with people and ends up allying herself with Raya to save her own kind, the spiritual world or whatever, from the Droon. That could work really well. But no, the baby turns out to be a completely normal human, just left as an orphan, and she's reunited with her parents at the end of the film. When a character this useful to the story is also completely nonsensical, It comes across like the writers wanted to kill two birds with one stone by introducing a comedic character who also solves a host of logistical problems for the protagonist. It comes across as lazy writing. To me, it's just so strange that there are solutions right there you could use, but they don't use any of them. They just say, oh no, just Ninja Baby.
Ninja Baby, okay. But she's like 2.
Sure.
So...
What?
Yeah.
It's like, not all the babies are like that.
Only this one is.
Only this one. Okay.
I think your child is possessed or something.
Yeah, something's wrong with her.
In conclusion, Raya and the Last Dragon is a forgettable fantasy flick from a company that seems more out of touch than ever.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a kids' movie. Stories for children often need to be more simplistic, but simple and stupid are not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to take the time to tell a story, make sure that it's well told.
Raya's story is wrought with terrible writing, senseless characters, and a message that does far more harm than good, both in-world and out-of-world. It promises an entrancing tale of friendship and conflict in a rich, fantastical world, but it delivers only a fleeting glimpse of what could have been, amid gorgeous visuals and impressive artistic talent, before bailing out of control into an unsatisfying and predictable ending in the third act. It's one of Disney's most disappointing original films, in our opinion, and it stands as a testament to how far they've fallen from greatness. Yeah, and that's not a very controversial opinion nowadays, that Disney's getting worse. But this is one of their original films. Like, whenever something original is announced, it's like, oh, it's not a remake. It might be good. It's Disney. Who knows? But we were really shocked at how bad this was. In short, Disney, do better. Hire better writers or something. You have enough money to do that. You do. You have all the resources in the world. You can afford it. Get out there, do something that's worth watching, and then we'll go watch it. Yeah. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us what you want us to review next. Yeah. I'm working on some really long analysis videos. I'm working on Tenet. Tenet is a very big project, so it will take a while. You might also see something about the Green Knight from us soon, so stay tuned for that. Yeah, that's it. Adios. What initially attracted us to the film were the visuals. The individuals. The individuals. Yeah. Ta-da! I can do it. Reminds me of that. No.